Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at the collected adventures of the fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. This is actually the first issue of the Freak Brothers comic. The early issues had like titles above the Freak Brothers logo. So technically the comic is called The Collected Adventures of Yada Yada, but up here it does say Freak Brothers #1. And the early issues would all do that. Just have some kind of random title. This was one of the best-selling underground comics, probably of all time. I was reading the Comics Droid website, and in the first 3 years of its publication, this went through like many reprintings, and just in that 3-year period, it sold 500,000 comics. That's insane. I mean, mainstream comics weren't selling close to that. So pretty crazy how Gilbert Shelton just, coming out of undergrounds, college humor magazines, just made this like sensation, and to this day, whenever I talk to people who aren't really comics fans about comics, a lot of them know Tintin and Asterix, but then people of an older stripe, they know Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. So many people grew up reading these, or when they were, young hippie types. It's crazy. But they've been reprinted constantly. So, this is a $2 price tag. So this probably came out, I don't know, in the 80s. And they keep selling. So it's kind of amazing, the staying power of the Freak Brothers. Covered by Gilbert Shelton, of course. This is a nice fat issue. It's well worth whatever price it was. 52 pages, all Gilbert Shelton. This is before he had his assistants like Paul Mavrides and Dave Sheridan. And it's some fun stuff. Here, on the cover here, we see our 3 protagonists. We see Fat Freddy, Phineas, and Freewheelin' Franklin. And up here's Fat Freddy's cat, who kind of became a pretty popular character in his own right. But as we shall see, what Gilbert Shelton did was create these 3 classic cartoon archetypes. I mean, they're basically, their progenitors are like Mutt and Jeff and, all these classic comic strips. He just has that, captures that with the Freak Brothers. Yes, this is actually the 1980 edition. But, let's get into this. So, the first strip is I like this one. It's the Freak Brothers acting very out of character. They're smoking pot and they're drooling and they're acting like maniacs and they're getting angry and it's making them want to molest little girls. And then we realize that it's a public service announcement movie, The Truth About the Killer Weed Marijuana. And they just were acting in this, anti-drug film to get some money to buy more pot. I like that idea, though. And so most of the strips in this comic are reprinted from the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers appearances in underground papers in the late 60s, early 70s. So all the one-pagers, I assume, are probably those reprints. And there's a few stories in here that are 2, 3, 4 pages. I assume he made that for this comic, because I don't think the underground papers would reprint such big strips. So we start off here with the freaks pull a heist, and once again we see Franklin repeat his famous motto: "Dope will get you through times of no money better than money will get you through times of no dope." I think that was on t-shirts when I was growing up and stuff. So a lot of these comics they're pretty slight as far as plots. It's almost every comic is the Freak Brothers need weed and they figure out a way to get some or attempt to get some. But we can already see here at this point, I think the original this kind of stuff came out, 68, 69, 70? I should have looked that up, sorry. But already his cartooning chops are so solid. Look at the lettering in this panel. That's just great. Really good stuff. And because remember, Gilbert Shelton had been drawing comics by probably for 6-7 years at this point. He started in College Humor magazines in '62 and was drawing in Cartoons magazine. So he was like, by the time the Undergrounds came around, he was a kind of a pro. And he was already, as you can see, look, the lettering's flawless. A lot of Underground cartoonists, not so much. They were just all about drawing groovy stuff. But they didn't grow up loving comics and practicing cartooning. And Gilbert Shelton he's got it all down. So this story is basically Freddy is so hungry that he's going to eat the other Freak brothers. So the Freak brothers realize they're going to have to get some food for Freddy, or he's going to eat them. So they rob this store. They pull some scam. That's nuts. And Freddy's finally satiated. And while they take Freddy out, they steal some more food for later. So like I said, I assume this was made for the comic. There's some new stuff in here. This strip, for example, this was reprinted in Feds and Heads, which we made a video about last week. So I assume that, he wanted these Freak Brothers collections to be complete. So even though he just reprinted this a year or two before in Feds and Heads, he reprinted it again, which I could see the logic of that. Here's another new story, I assume, because it's 2 pages. And this is one of the few that has nothing to do with illicit substances. It's Phineas makes this life-size remote control car. And of course, it doesn't end well. But it has all these Disney references in it. He puts a Mickey Mouse doll in the driver's seat. We see the Beagle Boys here. The Duckburg Times. It's pretty fun stuff. Gilbert Shelton, loves, at least back then, he loved his pot, but he was also a big gearhead. A lot of his strips, especially Wonder Warthog, he puts in all this fun car stuff, hot rod stuff. Oh, I think this is another new strip made for the comic. The Freak Brothers go to college, and Freddy gets kind of radicalized. I mean, to the extent that he can be. He just thinks it's a fun idea, so he runs off to the college campus to join the revolution. And of course, hijinks ensue. And of course, he causes a lot of chaos and ends up running back home to the pad to get high with his friends, with the brothers. Yes, as we progress, we'll see that his inking gets a little tighter. All this crazy inking for Phineas's beard. Obviously, I think using a pen, I assume. Really ornate shading. It's pretty nice. I like this too. It's the Freak Brothers Fun and Joke Corner. There's a little maze to help Fat Freddy find some weed. Snappy comebacks. This is a pretty good comeback. Back then, hippies had to have straights say, I can't tell if it's a boy or a girl when they'd walk by because they had long hair. So this guy's snappy comeback is, why don't you suck my dick and find out? I never heard that one. That's a good one. Yeah, some of the beautiful shading in here, the detail. Maybe Gilbert Shelton likes speed a lot too, because that's a lot of man hours. Back to the reprint strips. Oh, and here we see the first appearance of Fat Freddy's cat. He was just like Crazy Cat, he appeared in these little strips at the bottom of the page. And of course, he eventually graduated into his own comic. He was such a popular character. I wish these were dated. They're not. And I have a feeling they're jumping around. He's not reprinting these in chronological order. You know, I'm sorry, I just realized this one is dated, very tiny, 69, but most of them aren't. This is one of the few that is dated. Because you can almost tell they're jumping around in time because the style changes. Sometimes it'll be his earlier style. Sometimes, like within 2 years, Gilbert Shelton progressed a lot as an artist. And so it sounds like we can use this as a marker. By 69, he was getting pretty tight. I mean, we see all this like cross-hatching and using the pen, very detailed pen work, but not as detailed as some of the things we'll see in this. I hope it's okay. I'm not gonna like tell you the plot of every single one-page strip in here, because let's face it, almost every strip is kind of the same thing. They want pot, they try to get some. But I just wanted to show off the art more than anything. I also like this, how the earlier strips, I assume, they all had a different logo. So different font, a nice little header cartoon, and Gilbert Shelton would make some really nice logos, some really great graphics. More Fat Freddy. He's on model now. That first strip, he didn't really look like Fat Freddy's cat, but already by this, I assume, like early second or third one, he looks just like he's supposed to. More one-pagers. A lot of these are very topical, as you can imagine. That's kind of the fun of the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. It just shows you this time. You know, if you watch old movies and TV shows of the time, there were a bunch of old squares who were hippies. They didn't know. They had this stupid version of what the hippies were doing. They didn't really get it. But Gilbert Shelton was a total hippie and chronicling what it was like in those times. Of course, he's obviously making it zanier and goofier. This one's making fun of airplane hijackers, which was fodder for many bad comedians and sketch comedies shows. This one's a inflatable sofa. I mean, I guess that was a thing for a time. Later on, we'll see one about a waterbed. Fat Freddy gets called up for the draft. I like he can't get out of it for health reasons, so he tells them that he's queer. And they're like, well, that's all right. You can be in General Gaylord's homosexual battalion. We're very disciplined. And he runs out the door. So he predicted that gays would be in the military about 40 years later. This one's kind of fun. Just like Lil Abner idolized Fearless Fosdick, a Dick Tracy parody, the Freak Brothers, their favorite law enforcement officer in the funnies is Tricky Prick-Ears. And look at this. It's like Gilbert Shelton trying to do this weird Chester Gould style. I really like the style. I wish he drew more comics like this, very angular. You know, obviously trying to get that Chester Gould bizarreness of character design. But it's not quite there, but it's nice. It looks really good. He's basically this blind and deaf detective, and his fellow detectives all like fuck with him all the time and send him off on, you know, bogus missions just so they can laugh at him. It's kind of cruel, but like these a lot. Here's an interesting pinup drawn in a kind of like in a different style, more detailed. And it's scenes from the Revolution, the legendary dope famine of '69, which probably was a real thing. My old hippie friends tell me about the certain years you couldn't get pot. It was a famine. But man, the detail he puts in this, like all this detritus on the street, you can see the labels of all the booze and the bottles. It's like toxic tickle. Oh, there's an East Village Other newspaper in the gutter. Hog fat candy. It's all these random things. Really, it's kind of fun to like take time and look at them all. But this is pretty, look at this, look at that sky. All the lines there, that must have taken a while. But the funny joke about this is, without pot, all these people are like, maybe I should become an accountant. Maybe I'm going to go back to college and study, become a pharmacist. This one's kind of fun. One of the reprint strips is Fat Freddy becomes a Santa, a department store Santa for the season, so he can make some cash. And all the kids who sit on his lap, as you can see, Charlie Brown, Nancy, the little kid from Miss Peach, Dennis the Menace, and they're all telling Fat Freddy that they want drugs for Christmas, or bongs, or water pipes, or whatever, papers. Pretty fun. In this Fat Freddy cat, we see I think this is the first appearances of the roaches. So this became a running theme in Fat Freddy's cat comics, where there was this roach army living in the apartment who were constantly at war with Fat Freddy's cat, and he was constantly trying to kill as many of them as he could. But it becomes a pretty fun, plot device, and a lot of the cat strips revolve around that. Some more one-pagers. Nice cartooning. Look at that logo. That's a nice one. Yeah, like I said earlier, these one-pagers, I never smoked pot. I was never a stoner. So, I always had a thing about I don't know about Cheech and Chong, Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I thought I wouldn't get it. And I probably don't get it as much as a stoner would. It's probably funnier for those people. But of course, if you're a real comic aficionado, you read the Freak Brothers and you realize years later, his stories get more elaborate, and Gilbert Shelton reveals himself to be a grade A yarn spinner, just a great storyteller. And that's why, even if you're totally straight edge, Freak Brothers comics are great. These early ones, though, just the strips, they're kind of goofy, I'm kind of like, I do find them charming. I kind of like them. The cartooning's great. But it's not like they're making me fall off my chair laugh, a lot of them. It's just about scoring weed and stuff. And they are clever in how they score the weed. But it is kind of funny that these earlier comics, I'm just like, these are kind of fun. But a few issues later, when they start doing their multi-part epic stories, when Gilbert does, they get really great. Gilbert Shelton really just a great yarn spinner. But here he's already a great cartoonist for sure. It's undeniable. I would assume this is a slightly later one, because look at this. Just masterful cartooning. It just makes you want to read it. It sucks you in. The way the panels flow, the drawing. Yeah, more zaniness. Wow, that's another great logo. Oh, here's a fun one. Little Orphan Amphetamine, another comic strip parody. In this, of course, Little Orphan Annie is like a groupie chick living with daddy, who's not a big war profiteer. He's just a cool, groovy, rich hippie guy. And she gets fed up with him and hitchhikes to California, where everything's happening. and pretty soon realizes like every guy who gives her a ride takes advantage of her. She gets to San Francisco, all these filthy, dirty, scummy hippies take advantage of her. And after a few days, she's calling up daddy saying like, send me money for a bus ticket. I'm coming home. You were right. Of course, a week and a half later, she's back to being dissatisfied with daddy and giving him shit. But I really nice style here. More of their one-page reprint antics. So I guess a few of them are dated. I was incorrect. But just a handful. So they are definitely out of order. Because I saw some that were 69, some that were 70, and then back to 69. So it's kind of hard to track. But it does seem like the later ones are just definitely more detailed. Man, because I assume these were in newspapers, so they were probably printed pretty big, almost like an old stock comic strip. So you can kind of tell these are shrunk down, the lettering's smaller, but I kind of love it, just how much story is packed in every page. Look how many panels are this page. I mean, there's a lot of story packed into this one page of comics. I kind of like that. Here's another one of the rare non-drug related gags. This one's so odd though. Once again, like I was saying, Gilbert Shelton was kind of a gearhead. So this one is Phineas is driving his VW bug and the horn is so kind of dinky that he's embarrassed. Everyone's making fun of him. Like, you call that a horn? So he invents this massive, almost like apocalyptic sounding car horn. And he goes back to that neighborhood and just blows everyone away. Everyone thinks it's like the end times are coming. It sounds like a nuclear bomb, a train, a locomotive. Just an odd, very odd gag. Oh, here's a waterbed gag. Speaking of being topical. I like this. We get another tricky prick ear strip. In this one, Tricky Prick Ears has to stop these hippie radicals from blowing up the Statue of Liberty. And he succeeds. Excuse me. Really like these. It's interesting. Dealer McDope shows up in some of these as little cameos. So I don't know if Gilbert Shelton created Dealer McDope or Dave Sheridan had already created him and he would like say, hey, is that okay if I put Dealer McDope in the strip? I should find that out. I didn't see anything on when I did a mild research on the Freak Brothers. But yeah, it's definitely spelled the same, looks like him. And of course, as you know, Dave Sheridan, a few years from now, would become the main assistant on Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. So there's that connection. Fat Freddy gets a motorcycle. Hijinks ensue. Phineas wants to get back to nature. Hijinks ensue. This one might have been, it does look tiny though, so I think these were in the newspapers, even though it is a two-pager. Oh yeah, it says to be continued. So I guess this was a two-part comic page. And when Phineas, of course, like in most of those comics where people go back to nature, it doesn't go as planned. Nature's not as idealistic as we think it is. It's kind of annoying. So he burns all of his clothing. he has to wear this weird muumuu made of leaves back to civilization. And turns out he becomes a fashion sensation. People see his weird leaf muumuu and are like, oh my God, that's the best fashion we've ever seen. So this is kind of a weird strip for the Freak Brothers because Phineas totally becomes this kind of like greedy fashionista kind of asshole. So very out of character. This one I'm talking about, the jumping around time. This looks so much like the Feds and Heads era, his earliest undergrounds. Look how different and more cartoony it is than so many of the comics in this collection. So it's interesting just seeing, this is all like within at most 3 years time. Gilbert Shelton went from this to, to this. This looks like a later one. Like the ink work is so fine, like really, really nice. Yeah, just good stuff, good looking stuff. The writing's a little goofy. They're fun though. And I'm sure if you were a stoner like everyone I know, you'd get a little more out of it, There'd be a little more recognition. And one last inside back cover comic they squeeze in. Another Fat Freddy's cat with the roaches. And we even have a little freak mail, a little letter thing. I wonder if this is a real letter, or if he made it up. I mean, he probably made it up, but it could be real. Because the Freak Brothers were just that popular. They were very popular. And it says, "Dear Freaks, is there any way you might do your strip in a way that would make it more palatable to establishment newspapers? Yours sincerely, the Register and Tribune Syndicate of New York City." And he answers him, "How about a deal? If the establishment newspapers would quit promoting capitalist imperialism, the Freak Brothers might refrain from saying fuck out loud." I like that. That's a good answer. I mean, I'm curious about that. I wonder if, because I know that in the late 70s, they were trying to make a Freak Brothers movie. It was definitely optioned. I don't know how far it progressed, if there was ever a script or anything. So, I mean, they were like a mainstream success, the Freak Brothers. Here, this back cover is a nice pinup, but it's actually an ad. This was sold as a poster. Dope. Before and after. I kind of like that. It definitely looks funner, the after. I'd much rather be doing this than being a Cub Scout, getting fondled by my Scoutmaster. So that's it. The first issue of Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I guess in a week or two, I'll do the second one. I think there's 13 issues total. I'm going to go through them all over the next few months. But I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, they get a lot better once he starts telling more elaborate stories, because those are really fun. They're quite picaresque, as I don't know who uses that word. I think I heard that in college, but they're very fun. So there you have it, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.